we have the next speaker, Dr. Michael Chavez, who is the CEO of Duke Education Corporation. Duke is one of the very front-running, very prominent universities globally known for customized corporate education programs. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining. And Michael is also an author of a very famous book, Rehumanizing Leadership. So thank you very much, Michael, for joining us this morning. And over to you, Michael. We would look forward to listen to your perspectives. Just for the information of audience, Michael has a presentation for about 20 minutes time, and next 10 minutes will be kept for questions and answer. So the audience can post their questions in the chat box, and Nikita, my colleague, and Mamta will try and facilitate some of the questions will be taken by Michael for answering. Over to you, Michael, and once again, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Prem, and it's a real honor to be here this morning. I'll go till just about 11 o'clock this morning, and we'll hopefully race through some ideas that I think Sanjeev did an amazing job of teeing up for all of us. I wanted full disclosure. You know, the book that my co-author and I, Sudhanshu Palsule, and I wrote, called Rehumanizing Leadership, sounds a little bit like it's just sort of the next chapter of Sanjeev's talk, and that's probably not by accident. That's probably because we spent a great deal of time investigating Unilever's unique perspectives on this idea of humanizing the workplace, humanizing the culture and the organizations and the leadership of an organization like Unilever. If you're interested in this, Rehumanizing Leadership is the book. I'll say a little bit more about is really, really important, and then hopefully end a little bit on what the implications are for HR. So I'm going to try to, hopefully this will work in an application with which I'm not familiar. Hopefully you can see slides at some point. I don't know if you can see them.
I think sometimes.
Okay, it looks like it's trying. Okay. Hopefully you can see something that resembles a university campus, yes? Let me try it again. Sharing an application window. Hopefully you can see that. Can you see my application window or not? Maybe someone can tell me. You can see the slides, yeah? Okay, I can't see you, so I'm going to assume you can see my slides. Is that good? I see a thumbs up, so you can see some slides that look like a university campus. Brilliant. Okay, terrific. That's lovely. Okay, well, let's get started. The idea here is rehumanizing leadership, and what does it mean to build a culture of agility and resilience in a digital age? You know, when we got into this research, it to start this presentation a little bit with what I think the answer is, and then we'll go back and discover how we got to this answer. Key implications for human resource professionals in this new rehumanized world are the following, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about why. We have to look at it through three lenses, though. We have to look at it through the market system, which is sort of our relationship with the external world, our relationship with the market, the strategic view, then the organizational system, and then the human system. Now, those two last ones sound like they're overlapping. Think of the organizational system as the hardware and this human system as the software. But essentially, organization system is about processes, and human system is more about culture and interpersonal interactions. Market system. The key implication is we need to spend much more time building capability to build exploration and to help leaders to reframe problems and opportunities in terms of purpose. In other words, why we are here and whom we serve, as well as vision and values. And the short answer to why that's true is because strategy has been demoted in this world. Strategy no longer is that anchor for us. We have to go a higher level of purpose, which is more holistic and more enduring. If you think about this idea of pivoting organizations, pivoting is all around a central axis, which means that the idea of change or agility has within it the paradoxical concept of stability. So paradoxically, leaders have to focus on stability in order to enable agility. But that stability has to be at a very high level of the macro non-negotiables: purpose, vision, values, macro processes, but basically those are the big ones. The organization system, we have to build, as HR professionals, build new practices to enable faster decision-making and shared learning. Sanjeev did a wonderful job talking about speed and the different levels of speed. Designing and facilitating new interactive processes and routines, ones that we can build in. Routines are repeatable, almost ritualistic kinds of disciplines that we build in our organizational systems that help us to build new shared habits, essentially. Finally, the human system, it's really about building a new leadership playbook for culture change, because culture change is now a phenomenon that is with us to stay. We will be constantly adapting our culture. Culture is always lagging, always trying to catch up with where we need to be. And so our job as leaders, and therefore as HR professionals, is to always be in the culture change business. That includes also deepening inclusion and belonging systems. Now, we used to call this diversity and equity and inclusion. That's incorporated into this idea. But I want to highlight the importance of the outcome, which is the feeling of belonging, and practices and metrics that get us to that. Also, finally, we have to rebalance our performance management systems to include more unlocking of intrinsic motivation. Not just coaching to task or performance outcomes, but coaching to intrinsic motivation. What is it that people need to unlock their discretionary effort? Now let's go back and kind of rewind a bit and think about why do we need, what's really going on in the world that's demanding this agility. Now, Sanjeev talked a lot about it, so I'll go through this quickly, but there are a few subtleties I want us to dwell on. The first is our very mental model of change is different. We used to think of change as this episodic, long period of time, say the course of, any one of the revolutions that, for example, my generation was part of, the information revolution, the industrial revolution, all of these revolutions took 20, 30 years to do. In this case, industrial revolution over 70, maybe 100 years. And then there's this kind of period of relative stability, which is, I think, what we entered in the 80s and 90s. But what that's been turned into is not just another change curve, but change curve on change curve on change curve, which is why we're hopping from one curve to the next now. That's our new reality. It's going to stay that way in our lifetimes. And that's the nature of the context we're living in. Strategy, I said, was demoted. Here's part of the problem. We used to ask the question, what do we need to do in our strategy with digital? How do we incorporate a digital component in our strategy? But nowadays, what's happened is digital is now shaping the very context that strategy is made in. And strategy, therefore, incorporates digital, and now it's kind of all together. It's all one thing. It's the air we breathe. And importantly, we have to stop thinking of strategy as a digital transformation as being equal to automation. That world we are already past. It used to be that digital transformation was really incrementally putting our existing business models on digital roller skates, as one of my colleagues says. But now it's about shifting how value is created. And we have to not use the analog thinking and tools we have to try to enable this. The old world was this way, and this is from my colleague Ryan McManus, who says that essentially investors had money, gave it to corporations, and corporations' job was to exploit ideas and investment options. But nowadays, those corporations are no longer the intermediaries of this new world. Two things have changed. Number one, the ideas and investment options have proliferated because digital transformation is not just about digital roller skates or automation. It has fundamentally increased the number of ways we can add value in the system. And that is also evidenced by the fact that we not only have investors in the mix, we have this mixture of ecosystems, accelerators, incubators, startups, all vying for the same capital and all vying for the same access to those investment options. Now, the problem we have is that we're inheriting organizations built on this model. This is a military industrial model that we're incorporating. If you want any evidence, just look at our organization charts. Notice we have officers at the top. That's a military concept. We have silos that are built below those. Everyone's got a part in the game. It works beautifully when things are stable. It's very linear. It's terrific for control and execution of similar things. We saw the success of this in military models and also in industrial models early on in the 20th century, for example, in the automotive industry, which was all linear, it was repetitive, it was about taking variability out of the system and improving quality all the way up until the 80s and 90s. That, of course, has changed. And by the way, the leadership implications are represented in this photograph where you see up above, there's a catwalk. And that's where the mezzanine leaders were, the supervisors, where they would literally supervise. They would be overseeing the workers for control. Of course, we can still see this in our day-to-day artifacts that we have in front of us. We have command, we have control. It is still in our lingo, and that's how pervasive it is. Fortunately, I will remind you of one thing: you still have an escape button. So just remember that to get out of all of this. In all of this, as we move towards AI, my colleague Vivian Ming, who's founder of a startup in Silicon Valley that specializes in AI, she's a theoretical neuroscientist, and she says the job description of the future, the only way to robot-proof your job as we start to bring AI into more complex tasks is to do this: become a creative and adaptive problem solver. She went on to say, actually, it's not just problem solving, it's to be a problem explorer. This is the fundamental human capability that we have and that still differentiates us from artificial intelligence. And it's the thing we need the most in this world of constant change. We need more humanity because we need more creative, adaptive problem exploration. But how do we unleash that? It's all the things that we talked about. And this plays out in the three systems I mentioned: the market systems, the organization systems, the human systems. So the market systems, the challenge there is we have to move from a planning model, which is linear, to an exploratory model, which is experimental. The organization systems have to start to explore not just how they change the core of their business, but how they experience the edge of their business, these parts of the business that are starting already to experience change and new ways of thinking. They then have to build those into their core and flexibly and create a new core and then experience the edge again. And it kind of goes on and on. The organization systems have to move from hierarchy and control to one that is based on autonomous and entrepreneurial models of working. And finally, the human systems, which includes culture, teams, and talent, have to move from ways of working that are based on efficiency and scale to ones that are based on speed and adaptability. So I'm going to talk about each of those very quickly, because we need to, in the market system, be able to see around corners, connect strategy, customer, innovation, and digital. We have to be very connected to the customer, and we have to remember we have to humanize the customer as well, not just meet their needs, but understand them and embed their thinking into the way we work and the way we meet their needs. In addition, we have to build in our organizations new metrics, faster and smarter decisions, and we have to harness those for business impact. And in our teams, culture, and talent, we need smarter, smaller, and agile teams. We need more purpose to be the guardrails of action, to be able to create just enough clarity, but just enough looseness to be able to allow those teams to maneuver, experiment, and have just enough autonomy. But all I left, thank you everyone for your patience with the technology. Where I left off was talking about the fact that we've got these factors that are really influencing our culture. Our culture is moving towards having, in order to be adaptable, we really have to be pivoting, as I mentioned earlier. That means more outside in, more innovative, experimental, improvisational, faster, connected, and collaborative. In this world, teaming is greater than teamwork because teaming is more flexible. And importantly, context and principle driven. And the two in red are really the ones that I wanted to emphasize. Of course, frictionless, which is removing unnecessary complexity. I'm going to race through this and really get to the bottom line here, which is in an agile world, remember, we're inheriting organizations that are essentially execution driven, right? They're based on this idea of efficiency and scale, and therefore we have lots of procedures and rules. We have lots of consistency. We focus on what we know. We're internally focused, and we value getting this right the first time, every time. Now, as I was going to mention, when we're flying in an airplane, we want the right-hand side, lots of it, because we have well constructed safety procedures that we want to be followed. We don't want creativity and learning. We want execution, and we want consistency. However, in a world where adaptability is becoming the way of working, we need more of the left-hand side, which is learning orientation, because the right-hand side is about control and the left-hand side is about building a collaborative experience. This is a world where we need more principles so people can be free to act. We need to reward smart risk-taking. We need more curiosity about what we don't know. We need more external focus, and we need more experimentation. Now, these are often seen as opposites, but the reality is we have to sometimes be in the right-hand side and more often than not be in the left-hand side as the world becomes more uncertain. This means we have to build these muscles on the left-hand side. And importantly, be able to recognize in an ambidextrous way which situation we're in at any given time. This gentleman is James Burke. He was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson in the 1980s. He unfortunately had to endure the crisis called the Tylenol crisis in 1982, where 7 people died because they consumed extra strength Tylenol, which had been laced with cyanide. The interviewers who interviewed him afterwards asked him, this must have been extraordinarily stressful to deal with this level of change and ambiguity in your life and uncertainty. And he said, actually, it wasn't stressful at all. It was very sad, but it wasn't stressful because we have something called the J&J Credo, which gave me clarity. And I brought that clarity to my team, and I simply asked them, what's the most ethical thing we can now do? 7 people have died in Chicago. What should we do? We should, they agreed, pull all product from all the shelves in the United States for all product. Of course, it's huge expense to the company. Stock dropped, revenue dropped. It's the biggest product they had. But they did it, and they recovered remarkably. They re-entered the market with tamper-proof packaging after recalling all that product. In fact, they invented it. Their share rebounded, their market share rebounded in 1 year, and their stock recovered only 2 months later. Contra example, something I lived personally, Coca-Cola, 1999, Belgium. I was working with a team in communications in Brussels, and here's what happened. The 26 children from one school in Belgium reported feeling sick from consuming tainted Coca-Cola in their words. In fact, Coca-Cola investigated it, and it wasn't toxic, which was a relief, but it was a mixture problem in the manufacturing process. The company recalled some of the product, not all of it. They basically framed it as a technical issue. 48 hours later, more children went into the hospital. Finally, the health authorities had had enough. They stepped in 3 countries and banned the sale of the product. There had just been food scares in that part of the world, and so everyone was on edge. Of course, because Coca-Cola wasn't doing it, it was very costly. And it was written about soon thereafter, saying that basically it was amplified by the fact that Coca-Cola didn't really communicate this well. And in fact, what had happened was the truth of the matter was this problem was never framed as a human problem. It was framed as a technical problem. And this is the essence of rehumanizing leadership, the ability to always go up to the largest, highest human values that drive us, reasons for existing, purpose, that allows us to frame complex questions to be able to understand what we need to do when all else does not tell us what to do. What we're actually up against as HR professionals is culture shift, because we're inheriting organizations that I would typify, according to the research by Michel Gelfand in 2018, as loose, tight cultures. Ones that are built on controls over the micro level parts of our organizations: actions, decisions, approvals, practices, controls, etc. And very loose on the macro level, things like that we just talked about, like purpose, vision, values. We don't talk about this very much. Or we put them on the lobby wall and then we sort of imagine that they're relevant or they're doing their magical work. In fact, we have to move to organizations that are much more tight loose, the reverse. Now, we know we have to loosen up these actions, decisions, and approvals at the micro level. We've known that for 20 years. We've been talking about how we need to loosen up the organizations, make them more agile. But to do that, we actually have to tighten the macros. You can't just have loose because nothing will work. The macros give people the guardrails we were just talking about. And this is the essence of pivoting. Pivoting is change with stability. So we have to think about the stability within the change. There are a host of questions we as leaders can ask our people to help them to navigate the complexity of their work. And they tend to fit into these 5 categories: execution, strategy, vision, values, all the way up to purpose. But what's happened is, and we are trained to spend very little time at the top and lots of time at the bottom. There's always that gravitational pull to get pulled into the work. And what my colleague and I would argue is that we have to flip this around. In an adaptive world, we have to be much more focused on purpose, values, and vision. And importantly, we have to recognize that our brain chemistry above the red line is different. What we do as leaders when we are asking questions above the red line is purpose and meaning questions. We unlock creativity. And you will have experienced this if you were ever in a meeting when it was very tough and it was very complex problem solving and everybody was tired, and you might have been spinning your wheels. And in fact, someone just stepped back and said, look, let's just remember why we're doing this. And let's kind of let's take a step back. Let's think about our outcomes. Let's think about what's important. And everyone sort of breathed a sigh of relief and more creativity came into the conversation. That's exactly the brain chemistry effect of this flipping of the pyramid. So we're moving to quote again, Sanjeev saying, we're moving from a handcuffs model of leadership or management to a guardrails model, one where we're providing clarity, but wider lanes of clarity to allow people to make independent decisions to move within. This is a summary of what we think are the fundamental paradigm shifts that leaders are needing to undertake. Strategically, to move to exploration; organizationally, to move from efficiency and scale to speed and adaptability. And the human relational model has to move from this transactional model to a whole person model. Why? Because if we're transactional, the organizational arrangement is built on fairness and transparency, but not much else. Whole person allows us to have openness and empathy so that people can be fully engaged and fully creative. And that's what we need in this world. That's why rehumanizing matters. It's not just something that's nice, it's something that's vitally necessary. I think this is a really important one for HR to think about. How do we build organizations built on whole person engagement? And change levers that we are for leaders used to be strategy and structure, and now it's these higher order concepts of purpose, shared mindsets, behaviors, principles, and values. Our model of thinking about rehumanizing leadership, I've adapted to think about the implications for HR. Strategically in the market, leaders have to move to becoming explorers and connectors. Organizationally, they have to become designers and facilitators of collective creativity. And this human model being unlockers of potential and performance, we call that coach and multiplier. And there's lots of things that we can do as HR in each of those categories that help us, that notice. They're not all just about playing nice. They're really about discipline, routines, habits, framing, planning, lots of things that I think are, I come from a world of strategy consulting where it was all about discipline and process. And I still think that's true. It's just, it's a different way. And it's a larger, broader, more holistic way of looking at the organization and a more human way of looking at the organization. So to summarize, market system, we're in the business of building capability to help reframe problems in terms of purpose, values, and vision. We can be, as HR professionals, building new practices to enable faster decision-making and shared learning, designing and facilitating interactive processes and routines to create the speed and agile decision-making. And the human system, we have to be in the business of helping leaders to build playbooks for culture change, not blueprints, but playbooks. Playbooks means something that's a sort of a short list of actions that you can experiment with and shape. But constantly stay with that experimentation and shaping. And finally, deepening inclusion and belonging systems, but building metrics around them. And really importantly, performance management systems have to focus not just on task, but on unlocking intrinsic motivation. So instead of coaching to task, we also need to be coaching to individual purpose, motivation, and engagement. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Prem, but I want to end with a quote by Jamsetji Tata. I was fortunate enough to see this flash across my hotel screen back when we could travel. Tata said, this is in 1910, he said, in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. And based upon our research, I would argue that this is a way for us to think about the very nature of agility in this day and age. So with that, I'll hand it over to the hosts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was an amazing session by Michael Chavez. And I once again apologize for the technical glitches and the disturbance we've had this morning. But I'll try to very quickly summarize while thanking Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, who took time out to speak to us, the CEO of HUL, and Michael Chavez. There were some commonalities. Both of them spoke about change and change levers, about the fact that there's going to be disruption, inequality, machines are here to stay, and the pace and speed of everything is accelerated. And of course, there is a difference in agility and speed. Working in sync, and a very nice word that Sanjeev Mehta used was entrainment. So that was important. And he said, finding networks, external networks and polarities, risk-taking, and learning to work through placid waters and chaos, which is something that even Michael Chavez spoke about, which is pivoting through change with stability. Collaboration, both of them spoke about collaboration and the importance, and of course, the fact that resilience was extremely important. But what Michael Chavez ended with while he was humanizing the workplace, and what has left me with a resounding thought-provoking thing, was that principles will be all important, and HR is at center stage because culture is at center stage, creating a sense of belonging and learning outcomes with execution orientation, where cultures in the balancing act is extremely important. Once again, purpose, values, and are at the heart of cultures and culture building. So leaving you at that and going on to the next sessions, I'd once again, on behalf of the NCR chapter of NHRD, thank you for joining us today, and thank Sanjeev Mehta ji and Michael Chavez for being here. It's late in LA. It must be about 10 o'clock there. And we really thank him for taking the time out.
Thank you, Mamta. I'm sorry for some reason the technology isn't working with my camera, but I can see you all, and it was a delight to be here. As ever, one of my favorite places to work and work with clients is in India, and I'm delighted that I can feel part of it, even though I'm way over here in LA. So thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely conference.
Thank you.